Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. So yeah, Caitlyn Clark finally has some protection. And I'm gonna be honest, that's probably something that was needed from the moment she entered the WNBA. When Caitlyn Clark first came into the league, it felt like everybody wanted a piece of her. Every team wanted to test her. Every player wanted to see how she'd react. Whether people want to admit it or not, she was getting targeted on a regular basis. Now, are teams still trying to do it? Absolutely. Let's not pretend that has completely disappeared. Caitlyn Clark is still the biggest name in the league, and opponents are always going to play her differently. But I do think they're a little more careful than they used to be. And a big reason for that is the Indiana Fever now have players willing to step in. And no, I'm not just talking about Sophie Cunningham. I'm talking about Sophie Cunningham and Myisha Hines-Allen. I've said this for months about Myisha Hines-Allen. The Fever didn't bring her in by accident. They knew exactly what they were getting. They were getting a player who brings toughness, physicality, and an edge that every good team needs. That's part of her role. That's part of what makes her valuable. I've always said that Sophie Cunningham isn't scared of anybody. She'll talk, she'll compete, and she'll get under people's skin. But when it comes to players that opponents genuinely don't want problems with, Myisha Hines-Allen is near the top of that list. Just look at the situation involving Alyssa Thomas. Alyssa Thomas is one of the toughest players in the WNBA. Nobody questions that. But when things started getting heated, you could see exactly what was happening. There was a level of respect there. There was an understanding that Myisha Hines-Allen wasn't going to back down. Then, after the elbow and the confrontation, Myisha Hines-Allen immediately stepped in. That's what teammates are supposed to do. That's what enforcers do. And honestly, that's what Indiana Fever fans have been wanting to see. Because for a long time, it felt like Caitlyn Clark was left to deal with everything herself. Now she isn't. Now you've got Myisha Hines-Allen bringing toughness and physicality. You've got Sophie Cunningham bringing energy, attitude, and the ability to completely annoy the opposing team. And Sophie Cunningham might be the funniest part of all of this. She has a way of getting under people's skin unlike almost anybody in the league. She knows exactly how to irritate opponents, and somehow she always finds herself in the middle of the action. That's why this combination works. Myisha Hines-Allen is the player you don't want to challenge physically. Sophie Cunningham is the player who drives opponents absolutely crazy. And when you've got both of them standing beside Caitlyn Clark, teams are probably thinking twice before trying to push things too far. That's a very different situation than what Caitlyn Clark walked into when she first entered the league.
Just watch this whole thing happen. Watch this whole thing happen from this angle. Let's take a look at this full angle. Just watch Sophie Cunningham here. She starts off just pointing, talking to the refs, and just watch. Just watch. She continues pointing to her, not even looking at her. And DeWanna Bonner is continually crashing out even more. She's just getting angrier and angrier. Grace Van Slooten is hilarious, by the way. Justine Pissock, look at Grace Van Slooten here in the top right corner. She is just pissing herself laughing at what's going on. She is just laughing, and her and Justine Pissock are just there laughing and cheering this going on. They're like, there's no way. There is no way. Justine Pissock and Grace Van Slooten are like, what the fuck is going on? Sophie Cunningham goes near and makes sure that DeWanna Bonner can see her. DeWanna Bonner is crashing out even more. She's just walking around pointing. It is still the funniest. And is she still going off even more? Is it still the funniest tech ever? And you might be saying, that's not enforcing. I agree with that point. There's a big caveat here.
But here's the thing that a lot of people are missing. When all of this happens, who ends up becoming the story? It's Sophie Cunningham. Think about it for a second. When Caitlyn Clark got hit by Marina Mabrey, what was everybody talking about the next day? Was it Marina Mabrey? Was it Caitlyn Clark? Not really. The conversation quickly shifted to Sophie Cunningham. And that's what makes Sophie Cunningham such a fascinating player. People can love it or hate it, but she has a unique ability to pull attention toward herself. Whether that's intentional or not, she somehow finds herself right in the middle of every major conversation involving Caitlyn Clark. Now, compare that to Caitlyn Clark herself. I've always felt like Caitlyn Clark enjoys competing more than she enjoys everything that comes with being Caitlyn Clark. There's a difference. Being the biggest star in the WNBA means dealing with constant media attention, endless debates, social media drama, and people trying to turn every situation into something bigger than basketball. Back in 2024, Caitlyn Clark was constantly being asked questions that had nothing to do with basketball. Every controversy somehow landed on her doorstep. And honestly, I don't think that's something she particularly enjoys. That's where players like Sophie Cunningham become valuable. Because let's be honest, if Sophie Cunningham wasn't doing what she does, and if hines-allen wasn't there either, the conversation around certain incidents would look very different. Take the situation involving J.C. Sheldon. If Sophie Cunningham hadn't inserted herself into the spotlight, people would have spent days arguing about Caitlyn Clark. The headlines, the social media posts, and the television segments would all be focused on Caitlyn Clark. Instead, Sophie Cunningham becomes the lightning rod. She takes the attention. She takes the criticism. She takes the heat. And while some people roll their eyes at that, there's actually value in having a teammate willing to do it. Then you've got hines-allen. And hines-allen brings something completely different to the table. When you watch her interactions with players around the league, you can see it immediately. There is a presence there. There is a toughness there. There is an energy that says she's not backing down from anybody. Look at Alyssa Thomas. People can say whatever they want, but there were moments where Alyssa Thomas clearly understood exactly who she was dealing with. hines-allen is not somebody that's going to get intimidated. She's not somebody that's going to take a step backward. In fact, she's usually the person taking a step forward. And for a basketball team, that's important. Every successful team has players who bring different things to the table. Some players score, some players defend, some players create offense. Then there are players who establish a tone. hines-allen is one of those players, and Sophie Cunningham does it in a completely different way. Sophie Cunningham isn't trying to fight everybody, that's not what this is, but she's also not afraid of anybody. She'll chirp, she'll talk, she'll get under people's skin. For lack of a better comparison, she's a wind-up merchant. That's why the Angel Reese comparison makes sense in certain ways. Both players understand how to get reactions. Both players understand how to become part of the mental battle. And that matters, because if somebody is focused on Sophie Cunningham, that's attention they're not directing toward Caitlyn Clark. If somebody is frustrated with Sophie Cunningham, that's energy they're spending somewhere else than on Caitlyn Clark. That's part of the job. And while all of this is happening, Caitlyn Clark is watching. You could see moments where Caitlyn Clark acknowledged what hines-allen was doing. You could see the appreciation, because every great player wants teammates who have their back. That's exactly what the Indiana Fever appear to have now. They've got Sophie Cunningham, they've got hines-allen, and I honestly think you're going to continue seeing more players embrace that mentality around Caitlyn Clark. Maybe it's not everyone's personality, maybe somebody like Raven Johnson would approach it differently, but if you're a player with a Marcus Smart-type mindset, you're going to understand the importance of toughness, energy, and protecting your teammates. At the end of the day, Caitlyn Clark can stand up for herself. Nobody is questioning that. But having Sophie Cunningham and hines-allen beside her changes the entire dynamic. And that's exactly why these conversations keep coming back to them. Tell me what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe.